Type 054, Jiangkai class frigate. Ship brief. This is basically the Chinese Lafayette frigate. The Lafayette, for those of you not familiar, is a French frigate. It was one of the first ones in that navy to have a stealth-like design, shaped to the hull where the superstructure was all connected, the way you see here. And the Chinese made a copy of it, so we're going to talk about that in this brief today. Let's start in 2003. So some photos started appearing on social media wasn't a big thing, but on the internet back then, and got everyone's attention that China was building a new frigate. This was immediately labeled the Type 054, had a new hull shape that, like I said, connected the superstructure. This is the first one of the frigates that China was doing in this pattern, and it looked a lot like the Lafayette class, so everyone immediately kind of just labeled it that, Chinese Lafayette. Topside weapons and sensors, a lot of those were based on NATO systems, especially the air defense you see right there is actually a French system. But they did have Russian helicopters in the beginning. They used the Ka-28 helicopter, and they had to do some really interesting combat systems, digital to analog conversions to make all these systems work together with each other, which was really interesting. I'm not sure how they figured that out, but they did. So they got French systems on a Chinese ship and a Russian helicopter initially, the Ka-28, that was eventually replaced by the Z-9 Charlie. But it still used like Russian point defense, the AK-630s and all that, all communicating together in one ship. This is quite an achievement. To bring all these systems from different engineering platforms together onto one. But this is what the Chinese are good at. They're good at copying, using other countries' technologies. In this case, they did actually buy the license from French military industry companies after they got called out for doing this. But after the Tiananmen Square incident, they couldn't get any more French systems. So they're literally building two of these ships, one in each shipyard, with the remaining inventory of equipment that they got from like the 1980s, right? And because they're going to run out, they're going to have to integrate these systems with full Chinese equipment and sensors in the next lecture. And just to be clear, we're talking about the Type 054, of which there are only two of these. And the Type 054 Alpha is where they went full indigenous systems. This has already been a little bit confusing with some of the media that I've been posting teasing this lecture. So just know that this is a very unique ship. Okay, and it's going to be the basis for what's coming up next. So here we are. We've got a top-down comparison looking at both these ships. The French Lafayette class, you can see, has a much larger helicopter landing area in the rear. But in terms of like capability, it's very similar. Similar gun size. They have a multi-mission small boat bay. On the French, the bay doors are open, so you can see the small boat. And on the picture to the right, those bay doors are shut, so you don't see the small boat, but it's there. It's right near the helicopter hangar at the back there. And that's why they called it the Chinese Lafayette. So here are the shipyards that these will be built on, the Shanghai and the Jiangzhou, if I'm saying that right, down there. Just basically just the mainland part of Hong Kong, just north of Hong Kong is where that other shipyard is. And each of these shipyards are just going to build one. They're using up that inventory, and they're going to use the lessons learned from integrating these systems to move forward and build the very venerable Type 054 Alpha coming up next. But for today, we're going to talk about these Hull 525 and 526, identical ships just made in different shipyards, proving design of concept basically. And here are the systems that are on this ship. It is a ton. So we're going to go over the Seagull radars. The Castor fire control system is what controls that 8-cell missile launcher on the bow there. They have rice bowl radars for the point defenses. Surface search radars. The interesting thing about the rice bowl radar is they only have one of them, and they have two guns. So probably they can only engage one gun at a time, one gun port, one gun starboard. And it kind of makes sense. If you're being attacked, by naval missiles, probably coming from the same direction if they're coming over the horizon. That's not always the case, but that's what they're prepared for here. And you could call it a limitation if it's just one at a time. The Type 344 radar is for the 100 millimeter gun on the bow. And they have surface search radar is 364. We're going to go over all these in detail, like I said. Bullnose sonar system. The data links and SATCOMs all are connected together. And with the Type 92 radar warning receiver and the HC-100. We got some great photos of the electronic warfare suite on this. That's not something that's normally public, but we found some great photos. Big shout out to SaturnX, by the way, for a lot of these great photos. Appreciate that. So it's 4,300 tons, 440 feet long, 52 feet wide. So she's kind of girthy, big girl. She's got diesel engines, 4 of them, of the Pilestick 16 PA6 STCs. And we'll show you those and their capabilities here. When they have all 4 of those running together, they can push up to 27 knots, which is slower than, I'd say, the standard. The standard now is 30 knots minimum, and most navies can push that up to between 32 and 35. But she does have a maximum range, if she's doing like 18 knots, of about 8,000 kilometers before needing to refuel. Her weapon systems are comparable for the time. She has the YJ-83 anti-ship cruise missile. It's basically a harpoon or an exocet, subsonic anti-ship. The HHQ-7 8-cell SAM launcher on the bow, as we've mentioned, with the 100 millimeter naval gun there, 4 of the AK-630 Sea Whizzes, and triple mount YU torpedoes that are actually hidden behind a door that can shut to keep them stealthy from a radar perspective. So along with a door that opens up for the small boat mission bay, there's another door that opens up for torpedoes. There's doors on each side. And today they're using the Z9 Charlie helicopters. That's all we're going to talk about. They stopped using the KA-28 on this ship. All right, let's start with the radars. This is the Type 360 Seagull. And 360 is a great number for it because it's a 360 degree coverage plus azimuth. So it gives you an air range, altitude all the way up to 10,000 meters. Might as well be, 100,000 feet or something, or 35,000 feet or something. 140 kilowatt power with 28 decibel gain for those of engineers out there keeping notes, and 900 pulses per second. So pretty accurate. The pulse per second is like an update rate. So the higher that number is, the better the radar is. And you can see it right there. It's the radar right at the top of the forward mast. All right. Now, right below that, in front of that mast, is the fire control radar for the surface-to-air missiles. This has a 30-kilometer range against aircraft, but for sea-skimming missiles, it's only 15 kilometers. So this thing, if you got a sea-skimming missile 15 kilometers away from you, you have, less than a minute before it's going to hit you. So they have to get these missiles up in the air if they have any chance of surviving that attack quickly. It does use the KU band radar and has infrared tracking on the missiles as well. You can see the IR sensor right there. That's the yellow arrow, and it tells the missile to correct course if it needs to. It has a 30 kilowatt power with 21 decibel gain and 7,200 pulses per second. So very rapid update. And this is kind of the difference between a Chinese and maybe a Russian radar and this French radar. Look at the update rate. Of course, it's a higher band and it's doing point defense, so it's going to have a high update, but much higher than the air search radar had. Rice Bowl. Rice Bowl is right there on top of the helicopter hangar. This has changed over time, but these 2 ships specifically have this one. Rice Bowl often gets confused because there's different versions of the Type 347 radar. This is specifically the Type 347 Gulf, or G radar, and that does point control for the AK-630 guns. Okay, so there's other radars out there that share the same name, but they do different jobs. This is the G variant. It's an X-band radar, which is what you would expect for point defense, very high frequency, rapid update. It can search out to 30 kilometers and has a 15-kilometer anti-missile detection, but those guns do not have that range. This is strictly the radar range, and 150 kilowatts of power going through this thing. Pretty high powered for a fire control radar, especially for point defense. But there you go. All right, surface search radar, that's that big bowl on top. It's an S-band radar. 75 kilometer range, 60 kilowatt power with a 38 dB gain. This also does IFF, identify friend or foe. They've integrated that into this radar, which is interesting. A lot of times the IFF is its own system, but nope, they put it on this radar too. And it rotates at 30 rotations per minute. So inside that dome, there's an actual dish that literally rotates. The dome actually helps its bearing accuracy. The material that it's made out of is basically invisible to the radar beam. The radar doesn't even see it, but it helps align as it passes through the dome to keep those beams nice and tight. So it's a multi-purpose dome. Not only does it protect the radar from wind and rain and the elements, it's also helping with its performance. Here's the Type 344 fire control radar for the 100 millimeter gun on the bow. This radar is mounted above the bridge, forward of the first mast there. This one is actually indigenous. This is developed by the Jiangkai Research Institute for Navigation and Technology. They do all things radar over there. This is an IJ band, also has a TV and laser rangefinder. You can see the little laser rangefinder mounted next to the dish there as you look at the picture. This will track the shell and the target at the same time, which is kind of neat. So if the shell that misses the target by whatever offset, it will auto-correct for the next shell. So the lead time, or the lead of the shell, gets more and more accurate after the first shell. And here's the Rackle electronics navigation radar. This is interesting. I believe this is originally a British radar. IOC to 1979, and China, bought these for their civilian ships, and I believe they continue to get these for civilian ships. They're not supposed to be on warships. That's a breach of the sanctions. But this shows how much China cares about sanctions. They'll order this navigation equipment that's used commonly for civilian use, but because it performs so well, they'll put it on a warship. And, what are you going to do about it is basically what they say. So, but it's a good quality, high quality navigation radar. It is, line of sight point of view, as most navigation radars are. This doesn't go bounce off like the ionosphere and give you over the horizon targeting like an air search or a surface search radar for a military system would. This is simply don't run into the big ground that's next to you. So it detects everything from small ships like fishing boats and shorelines as well. You see a nice little picture of the old, that's a ray tube display, not even a flat screen. All right, so here's the bullnose sonar system, ladies and gentlemen. Look at some of the photos we got here. This is really good stuff, man. This stuff used to be really sensitive because this is a Russian sonar system, 100% Russian. Ain't nothing Chinese about this. But they did have to make changes, like I said, to the analog to digital converter so that it would talk to the Chinese fire control system. That's about the only modification they had to do here. It's pretty, technically a medium freak, low freak sonar, but it's not as good as Horsejaw. It's rather limited, actually. If you get snapped up by one of these, you're really messed up. But they claim to have 17-mile range and a 27 kilometer range in best conditions. And that would have to be like deep water, no layer, quiet environment, flat bottom, rock hard bottom. There's no way they're getting a 17-mile detection on this thing. But that's what they claim whenever China bought this from Russia. Still in use today, by the way. Yeah, still in use. All right, so Type 762 for this 18-tube decoy rocket launcher. This counters, radar-seeking missiles, both in search and track mode. It's a combo launcher, which means it has a infrared, basically a flare attached to the damn thing that tries to obscure the outline of the ship to the infrared seeker that's on the incoming missile. It is a fast response. They can fire these things off quickly with a push of a button instantaneously, and they can hammer that button 18 times if they want to and get it all out there. It is a 120 millimeter decoy, so it's pretty thick, and they have one of these on each side of the ship. You can see the arrow right there pointing to its right next to the smokestack. All right, so here is the radar warning receiver. I had to desanitize this slide a little bit, but I just pointed it out. So you got your ECM, and of course your radar warning receiver is the little, it looks like a little cylinder, basically, up at the top of the mast. There's one of those on each side. This is just one side. There's the exact duplicate of this on the other side of the ship for a full 360-degree coverage. The ECM and E-lint phased arrays that you see there actually project power to try and blind the IR seeker by overloading it, and other electronic warfare tricks that are very sensitive. So it's basically a projector. The very top one, the one that's marked with a white arrow, that's a receiver. The one right below it is also a receiver. The one that's at the very bottom, about midships there, that will project energy towards the torpedo, or not torpedo, towards the missile to try and get it to miss the ship. Basically burn out the electronics if it can. You don't want to be standing in front of that thing whenever it goes off. It'll cook your popcorn. All right, so here's the diesel I promised you. Yeah, this thing's interesting. So first of all, this slide of a sonar system is just an example, okay? I'm using this for demonstration purposes. I want to make that very clear. It is unclassified. I even went further and sanitized a few other things on the slide. So these diesels are made in China now. They were originally bought in Ukraine, right? But they made the Chinese version of the Ukraine diesel, and it's now called the STC for short. And it performs, or produces rather, over 25,000 ship horsepower, shaft horsepower, when all of them are running together. But they all run at the same RPM. Whenever this thing starts up, it's 1,050 RPM, which makes it very easy to identify. Like if you see this RPM on your sonar display, well, you got a classification right there, because this diesel engine is used on multiple warships, but not all of them. So it'll help narrow down your classification. And on this example of the sonar screen, you can see some biologics there. If you ever wonder what a fish, this is actually a whale I'm looking at here. If you wonder what whale song looks like on a sonar screen, that's it right there. There's lots of whales talking. Each one of those lines is basically an individual whale or a harmonic of a whale. So that's what biologics looks like. So you want to be looking for that, 1,050 RPM. And the way that they get away with, you're probably thinking, well, if they change speeds, aren't these mechanically linked? No, they're not. So they don't have to change the RPM to change the speed of the ship. Yeah, very cool stuff. And by the way, that's the way all ships are made today. All modern warships have no direct 1-to-1 or whatever ratio. There's no direct ratio anymore to engine RPMs with modern ships. Here we have the weapon systems. Let's get into this. This is the fun part. Everybody loves the weapons part. So we're going to talk about the YJ-83 Cicade anti-ship cruise missile. They do export this. The export, I believe, has a little bit limited range compared to the one the Chinese keep for themselves, because they're not going to sell a weapon system that might be used against them at some point in the future that has the same capability that they do, right? France and America, we all do the same thing. We sell a little bit dumbed down systems so that we don't end up fighting ourselves in the future. So the extended range of this missile can do 180 kilometers if they have that ER mod on board. We just assume that they always do, even though they may not. And it's basically an Exocet subsonic sea skimming missile, active radar homing seeker. By today's standards of supersonic missiles and hypersonic coming online, these are slowly losing their capability, right? But this is also a subsonic missile sank the Moskva. So they're not useless, but they're much easier to defeat than today's standard supersonic missiles. Has a HE warhead, semi-armor piercing, 190 kilograms. So all you Canadians out there can convert that to pounds if you want to. But pretty good sized warhead. It'll punch a hole in your ship if it hits you. Turbojet propulsion, just like the Harpoon, and solid rocket booster launch, so it gets that little initial boost up to speed, and then the turbojet fan is physically pushed by the wind coming into the inlet that starts the turbojet engine. It's like pushing your car down a hill to pop the clutch and kickstart it. Well, that's literally how these things are started, is that rocket motor pushes it for enough seconds to make sure that turbojet has enough energy to sustain itself. And then it just goes on its pre-programmed journey after that. All right, HHQ-7, also known as the FM90, CSA-N4. This is an 8-cell launcher based on a French Kroll-tail naval system. This IOC to 1992. They stopped getting these after the Tiananmen Square incident, so they had to make their own version after that. 12-kilometer range, 5-kilometer altitude, and 6.5-kilometer range against sea-skimming missiles. So, yeah, very close range. You got a harpoon, even if it's a subsonic missile at 6 kilometers, you're going to get 1 or 2 shots, no more than 3 shots off on an incoming missile. And that might be enough, but what if they shot you with 4 missiles? You might need some help from another ship in the fleet. They can shoot one of these every 6 to 10 seconds. I'm not sure why that window is so wide. China knows exactly how fast they can shoot these, but the public information is 6 to 10 seconds. It's probably a number closer to 6. And here's the problem. It can only shoot or track one target at a time. So, it needs to engage a target, hit that target, then shift the single target track radar to the next incoming airplane, helicopter, whatever it is, missile, and then shoot that. And you only have 8 shots before you need to reload the thing. And the reload on this is ridiculous. The magazine that holds all the reloads is topside right behind it. And in the picture there, it's collapsed or, flush with the deck so you can't see it. But actually, it pivots up like a ramp. So it matches the angle that you see in the top picture there, and then just pushes the weapon forward into those little holders. Because after they shoot that missile, all that's left is like a ring holder that holds the next reload. That entire cone-shaped thing is ejected on launch because it's part of the missile. Anyway, so the reload takes a long time. The only reload we've seen, it can happen at sea, but they have to have people topside to assist with the reload. They can't just hit a button and let it do it automatically. Or we haven't seen that, let's put it that way. Every time they do the reload topside, there's at least 4 people up there managing the reload. And you don't want to be topside if you're in the middle of a naval fight, right? Anywho, all right, 100mm gun. Big-ass gun for this frigate. I was surprised. I had to check this multiple times because I would expect a 76mm gun on this frigate. But nope, it's a 100mm gun. That's a big round. These IOC'd in 1983. Again, based on a French gun. 17-kilometer ballistic range, but really it's only going to hit anything accurately at 12 kilometers. And if you want to shoot like at a helicopter or an aircraft or an incoming missile, you're only going to get about a 6-kilometer range out of it accurately. That's the big caveat there. These rounds will go 17 kilometers ballistically, but you're not going to hit anything with any accuracy. So the different burst modes in it, you can do single shot, 2, 3, and then 6-round burst. And then you have different rates of fire. So that's rounds per minute, RPM. So 20, 45, and 90. So the problem with these, especially at 90, this thing will jam before you get 90 rounds downrange. It'll jam quickly. It has a bad reputation of jamming frequently. And because it's random, you can't really assign a value to it. It's not going to jam after the 2nd round or the 3rd round, but it could just jam at any time. But you know that eventually it certainly will jam. Yeah. And it shoots an HE round. It also has illumination rounds, just like old, World War II, illuminating a shoreline or whatever. It can do that. And that has an anti-air round, which was described to me as like a shotgun round, which would be interesting. I don't know how effective that would be, but I suppose if you shot a shotgun round that's 100 millimeters at a close range target, you would probably, I would think, get a hit. But I'm not 100% sure on how that anti-air gun works other than it was described as having a lot of little pellets, which look like canister shot from a cannon. All right, here's the AK-630C Whiz. If you watch a lot of my ship briefs, you should be very familiar with these guns, but I got a new photo for you there. Look at that. You can see with the cover off, looks like it's in a maintenance facility there, or maybe even a museum, because it has a information plaque on it. You can see what kind of the guts of this thing looks like. It's just basically a Gatling gun. Pretty advanced because it has a high fire rate, 6 barrels, 5,000 rounds per minute. The range is only 4 kilometers. So remember that radar can see out to like 15 kilometers, the one that directs this thing, the rice bell. But it's not going to be effective until that target gets within 4 kilometers of the ship. The rounds do self-destruct at 5 kilometers. I did not know this, but it kind of makes sense. You don't want a round that you're shooting, in a fleet. You imagine that you're surrounded by friendly ships to go past a target, miss it, and then hit one of your own ships or anything else that you're not shooting at. So the rounds do self-destruct. They have a little timer in it, so they don't inflict damage on other non-targets. And again, it is radar directed. You can take manual control over it and use the little TV camera with the laser rangefinder on the radar sensor that I told you about to manually fire these guns if you want to. But again, you have one radar and 4 guns. So I imagine you're either going to be shooting the port guns or the starboard guns, because you're not going to have your radar that's directional pointed in 2 directions at the same time. Yeah, so there is a little bit of a limitation there. All right, triple torpedo mount. This photo of the triple torpedo mount is from a different class of ship, so don't get confused there. But it was because the photo, you can't see the torpedo mounts, I had to just give you something to give you an idea of what this triple mount looks like. It's basically 2 tubes with 1 tube on top of it. It's a 324 millimeter tube, lightweight torpedo, shape charge. It's not wire guided. You just shoot this thing in a general direction and it will do a pre-programmed search, whether it's snake search, straight line. I think it has a circle search, but I don't know why you would use circle because it might come around and hit you. But they can also limit these torpedoes in depth so they don't hit surface ships. Because you start firing torpedoes in a fleet, you don't want to, shoot the guy next to you, right? Or behind you. There's all sorts of things you can do to these torpedoes to keep that from happening. Torpedo only has a 43 knot, top speed. And with the speeds of our submarines today, you got to be really close to actually get hit by this thing, because you can outrun that with enough lead. And I'm talking about a couple thousand yards. This thing will run out of energy before it hits you, because the max range is only 10 kilometers. The battery in here is not that great, right? So it'll go 43 knots for 10 kilometers and then sink to the bottom. Alrighty. Let's do the Z9 Charlie helicopter. So this helicopter has lots of different variants. So we'll talk about some common things, like it can be piloted by 1 person if it needs to, but there's typically 2 pilots in there. It has a 9,000 pound payload, 190 max speed, 190 miles per hour, but the cruise speed is 162. That's what you're going to see it at. And if it's doing 162 and not doing a lot of hovering, it can loiter for about 5 hours, operate for about 5 hours. But max speed and especially hovering sucks up fuel really fast in this thing. So 5 hours or less is your flight time here. Ceiling's 15,000 with a full payload. That's a limitation of the aircraft itself. So it does have a dipping sonar that I circled in green there for you. It's fully retracted, so you can't see the whole thing, but just know that it comes down and they can lower it down into the ocean and do active, passive sonar search there. They do have a J-band surface search radar that's there on the nose. Circled it in blue for you. They can carry lots of different weapons. There's rocket pods, the torpedo, like you see here on this one, it can carry a torpedo. There's a gun pod for this. It also has an anti-armor missile. So very versatile helicopter. It's used on more than just ships. It's kind of the jack of all trades. Now, it does have a TV-guided anti-ship missile, the C-701, but it's relatively short range. And think of it as like a tow missile. That's TV-guided with the little camera there on top. So it's not that effective, but it does exist. And tow missile's not a great example, but just know that you have to steer the missile in real time. And if you're doing that in an unstable platform or you're taking evasive action, that's going to be very difficult to do. And then finally, they have the TY-90 air-to-air missile. Couldn't find a picture of that for you, but I imagine it's much like the American Sidewinder, probably infrared seeking there for the helicopter. All right, let's talk about defense. Defense on this frigate. Oh, this is anti-submarine rockets. I thought this was chaff. Okay, ASW warfare. So we got the sonar system is bull nose, and they're out there pinging away. And if they get a detection, they can shoot these rocket bombs. These are RBUs, basically. Rocket bomb units, 240 millimeter, thick boys, like a mini keg, essentially being chucked at you. They have 2 launchers on the bow there that you can see. Each launcher has 6 of these rockets, and you either fire all 6 or you don't fire at all. It's an all or nothing thing, and it creates a little semicircle hemisphere around the target with a chance of hitting it. The modern warheads can do magnetic detection, but the old warheads are impact detection or pre-depth explosion. So these things will be configured before launch on how they're going to operate. They do have reloads on board, so if they're loaded underway topside, they would have 2 reloads on board below that for a total of 36 total bombs. And the range is only like 5 kilometers or less. This ship has to be essentially on top of your submarine, which that might be the actual range of their sonar system anyway. So it's okay that this has a 5-kilometer range, because that sonar system is not great, but it's what they got. It's what they use. All right, look at that. Final thoughts, man. All right, so final thoughts on this thing. So they only built 2 of these because of the sanctions. Like I said, they knew that they had to shift to an all-indigenous production after they built these 2. So this was literally like China saying, well, we're going to build this new frigate. Let's use what we have and get some experience and then improve upon that, which is what they did. And that's going to be in the next lecture. So this is the Type 054, 2 hulls, 525 and 526. That surface-to-air missile is probably the Achilles heel of this thing. You could shoot a couple subsonic missiles at this thing and hit it, right? As long as there was no problem with the missile having a mechanical failure on its part. If the missiles operate properly, you will sink this ship with a harpoon or 2, because the point defense, not that great. It needs to be escorted by an air defense destroyer or have somebody else with it. They do operate alone. They sent these things off the coast of Africa a couple of times for anti-piracy patrols, because they're protecting their interest with the Belt and Road program, which includes not just roads, but of course seaports and sea traffic, especially in the Middle East and African region. So they operated there a couple times and intercepted pirates, protected shipping, doing some good work over there, but in their own self-interest. And this is the beginning. This is the beginning of what will become a pretty capable and mass-produced Type 054 Alpha that's coming up next. They made over 30 of those, and that's what we're going to go over next month. I'm working on that one right now. But a lot of these systems are going to stay. So this is a very applicable ship brief for you to remember, because you're going to see a lot of these radars again. But they're going to get rid of that surface-to-air missile and put something pretty interesting on it that I'll wait till next time to tell you about. All right. Thank you to all the Patreons and the YouTube members that join. You guys are the reason I have the time to research these. And we'll see you next month. On the Patreon, you'll have the audiobook, all the photos, and everything else that comes with the supply officer rewards over there as well. So if you are on the YouTube side, know that the Patreon side does get a little bit more stuff if you're interested in any of that. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you next time.